Racial Justice Coalition and also the chair of this subcommittee. Let me hand it off to Kiki.
Good afternoon. I am Kiki Ferris, the Director of Specialty Field Services for Contra Costa County. And I just want to send a little nudge because Robin Nicole Livingston is also here, and she's the new probation manager who will be introducing herself. And she will also become the proxy for probation on this subcommittee.
Thanks, Kiki. And Robin Nicole, I guess you're also our co-newest member. I didn't realize you'd be with us moving forward, and that's terrific. So let me invite you to say hi to everyone also. I think maybe muted.
Well, that doesn't help. I'm Robin Nicole Livingston. I'm the probation manager for Richmond, and I also supervise Central Adult General Supervision and TAE.
Glad you're here with us. Let me invite Marcus to say hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marcus Walton, Director of Communications at the Contra Costa County Office of Education and proxy for Superintendent of Schools, Lynn Mackey.
Thanks, Marcus. And let me invite Gigi Crowder, again, our newest member. Hi.
Hi, thank you. I am Gigi Crowder. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Contra Costa County. I'm also in the role of the faith-based leader. I'm an elder at the Power Church in Brentwood, California, and we do a lot of work to improve health outcomes and specifically for juveniles and African Americans. Thank you.
Terrific. Yes, I see that note from Jane. Hi, Jane. Welcome. Let me welcome Chris to say hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris James here from the W. Haywood Burns Institute, serving as a consultant to the Racial Justice Oversight body at large and all of its subcommittees.
Thanks, Chris. How about to Patrice? Hi, Patrice.
Hi, all. Patrice Guillory here from the Office of Reentry and Justice, and be staffing today's subcommittee meeting.
How about Jill? Hi, Jill.
Hi there, Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
And I'll turn it over to Elsie Mills.
Hi, Elsie Mills, she, her. I live in Concord, community member. I'm also with Surge, showing up for racial justice.
Glad you're here. Let me hand off to Alyssa Robinson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Elisa Robinson with the Office of Supervisor Diane Burgess.
Hi. How about if I could turn it over to Ed Randall?
Good afternoon, everyone. Ed Randall, Director of Field Service, Contra Costa County Probation.
Hi there. How about my colleague, Jonathan Lava?
Hi, everybody. I'm joining you today from beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, and I am the supervisor of the juvenile unit in the Public Defender's Office. Nice to see you all.
Hi, Jonathan. And Kiki, I see that note. Perfect. Thank you. And another colleague of mine, Joni Spears. Hi, Joni.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joni Spears. I work also at the juvenile unit and I represent youth in Contra Costa.
Let me invite Doug Leach. Hi, Doug.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Lee, Faith Action Coalition, and also a member of the Racial Justice Coalition and Surge Contra Costa.
Let's see. How about Meg Keeley?
Hi, I'm a at-large community member of the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, a member of Surge, and also involved in the iChange mentoring program for juvenile youth.
Thanks, Meg. And Janet. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Janet. I'm an investigator with the District Attorney's Office, and I am the person who's actually creating and running the new Neighborhood Restorative Partnership Program that we are going to be discussing shortly.
Welcome. I'm glad you're here and excited to hear more about that program. And I know that we do have on our agenda. So I think we had everyone on the call, but let me just ask, did I miss someone in introductions? Okay, I think we're good then. And I see that, yes, today's agenda is in the chat. So thank you, Patrice, for putting that in there. And now we've got our share screen, so we're able to keep track of where we are in today's agenda. This is right. Just I did take the quick moment to say welcome to Gigi, and I'll also just add that I think it is really key that we hit as a oversight body each of our categories of representation, and there were a lot of thought and intention in putting those areas of representation to make this the most impactful work, and having Faith represented in Gigi through your participation here, I think is really important. So glad that we are kind of fully staffed, so to speak. We are at our levels where we should be in terms of making sure that we have input from key stakeholders and members of community as we are best informed and working here. Let me also ask if anyone has anything that's not, well, at this point, I think have done, hesitate. Anyone who's on our membership, on the subcommittee membership, who wishes to make an announcement or introduction beyond what we've already said before I turn it over to public comment? Yes, Jill, please.
I just want to let everybody know, I'm sure everybody on this call already knows, but the proposal, the report on the community-driven process regarding the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, that will be presentation/report will be on the Board of Supervisors agenda on Tuesday, October 25th. So just an FYI, that's a long been waiting for that to come, and we're very eager and excited to see what the next steps will be.
Terrific. Thanks, Jill. I'm glad that you flagged that. And right, all the more reason that we should be present at the supervisors meeting that's coming up, the one that's on the 25th, as well as always, but in particular of interest. Beyond that, or in addition, does anyone have something that they'd want to add at this point before I turn it over to public comment? All right, then I will transition at this time to Ranel. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
All right.
Good. Okay, so Ranel is another subcommittee member, and with Health Right 360.
Did I lose you?
No, you're good. You're here and we see your video, which is perfect. You're on the call, and now like we're fully staffed. This is terrific. I think we really have our full membership and participation. So at this point, your timing is good. We're just moving to public comment, and we've done our introductions. So glad you're also on the call to participate. And I'll invite public comment if anyone has on items that we're not already covering on the agenda, maybe to be super technical, clarifying that on our standing agenda item for JJCC updates, agenda item number 5, there's discussion of the ranch and proposal to close, and this is Marsh Creek. Okay, well, that's error, Marsh Creek. What was meant to be referenced to is the Orrin Allen Youth Facility, which is the ranch. So that was what meant by the ranch. And so in terms of asking for public comment now, I want to flag that is what we're talking about in agenda item 5. So if you have comments on that, know that we're going to get there. And if there's anything other than that, and also not on our agenda otherwise, that anyone here has public comment they want to make, I'm inviting that at this time.
Well, I would just add to your comment about that correction is just to be clear, the Orrin Allen Youth Facility is in Byron. So.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, Marsh Creek, entirely off base. That was not what ought to have been referred to, and I take full responsibility for that error. But good that we've clarified that, and not seeing any requests for, request to make public comment now. I will move us along in the agenda to approval of the record of actions. This is from our September 8th meeting. Fabulous to be able to look through this together, see is there any error. We're scrolling through together now. Thank you, Patrice, for taking us through. If anyone has any proposed changes, this is the time to bring those up. Making our way through there. I think we got through the content. All right, so not seeing any indication of there being an error, I would take a motion to approve the record of actions. Is there one?
Hi, it's Kiki. I'll move to approve them.
Thanks, Kiki. And second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Gigi. All right, is there any public comment on this item before we take a vote? Not seeing any requests for public comment. I think we're ready to take the vote.
Okay, Kiki, given that you moved, I take it as a yes.
Yes, thank you.
Jeff,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Renell,
Yes.
and Gigi, you second, so I take it as a yes.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Patrice. Thanks, everybody. All right, we're moving right along in our agenda. And this brings us now to agenda item number 4. And Janet, Era, I'd welcome you to speak to our group and tell us more about this program.
Hi, all right, so let me, oh, perfect, you have it up for us.
Well, just really quickly, Janet, if you have your own slide, in case you have notes or what have you, I'm more than happy to share privileges with you for you to share screen. Or if you'd like me to go through what's in the agenda packet here, I'm happy to do that as well.
This is perfect. Yeah, okay, this is perfect. We'll just go through. So apologies first. I know Dinah Becton wanted to be in on this meeting, but some other stuff was already on her schedule. So I'm going to try to do this some justice. It's always better when we have DA Becton out here, right? Excuse me. And I know I've met some of you guys. I believe a couple of you guys have been in on this presentation in the past. So sorry in advance for the repetition. So my name is Janet. I'm one of the investigators here at the District Attorney's Office. DA Becton assigned me the wonderful task of creating initially what was called a community court. We learned rather quickly that that's not a name that was going to work. The whole point of this is that it's a pre-diversion program, and that we don't want to make people feel like they're still going to court when that's not the case, right? So we've renamed it. The name of the program itself is Neighborhood Restorative Partnership. And if we can just go to the next slide. Perfect. So what is the NRP, or Neighborhood Restorative Partnership? It is a pre-diversion, or excuse me, a pre-filing diversion program. I know there's a lot of youth folks on this group. This is an adult program, although I believe there is something in the works for youth, but in the meantime, this program itself is meant for 18 and over. We use restorative justice principles to try to resolve low-level misdemeanor type cases. And this is all done outside of a courtroom. What we have is a group of volunteers who have been through restorative justice training. That training is an initial 24 hours, which is broken up into 8 weeks. That's the mandatory 24 hours. After that, they do an additional year of training once per month where they meet to go over what's working, what's not, and to make sure that they're up on the latest principles. The panels consist of 3 volunteers per panel, and those panelists work together with the participant. So in our situation, we would typically call them defendants. In our program, we don't call them defendants, we call them participants. The panel works with the participants and they all meet together. In some cases, the victim in a crime wants to be present. In other cases, they don't, but they can send a surrogate on their behalf. They can provide a letter that they want written, or they can just simply not participate. That does not affect whether or not the participant gets to go through the program, but they do have the option of being present. These panels, or excuse me, these participants come up in front of this panel. All together, they work together, they work as a team to come up with an agreement that kind of helps, one, make sure that this person is held accountable for their actions. 2, that the person is provided with resources that might have put them in that situation to begin with. And 3, to make sure that we can help them not end up in this situation again. So how do we make the community whole that we've affected? How do we make the victim whole that we've affected? And how do we help that participant make sure they don't end up in this situation again? So our program is confidential and it is completely voluntary. So the way it works is once I get a case in and we determine that it is a good fit for NRP, I reach out to that participant. They get a letter in the mail, they get a phone call, and I basically kind of walk them through the process. I explain it to them. A lot of what I've gotten recently is that it's too good to be true. This cannot be real. Let me reach out to an attorney first. And then people end up spending money paying attorneys for something that they could have gone through completely free. So it is free of charge. If a participant decides to go through the program, I walk them through the entire process, set them up with a panel. If they choose not to participate, we do continue with the regular filing process. So our misdemeanor team would in fact file the case. We do not put cases into the program that are not fileable. So if it's not something that we would typically take to court, but that we can't necessarily take it at that moment because it just somehow didn't make it into the pile, or if it's a case that, this person really doesn't have a criminal history, we don't want to ruin their lives forever. We want to kind of say, all right, look, you made a mistake. Let's get you through this process rather than putting you in front of a judge. And let's work through that program. If the person successfully completes the program, then we do not file charges and it doesn't appear on their rap sheet as if they had gone to court. So I think I skipped a few slides, but if we want to keep going, Patrice. So these are just some of the principles. Restorative justice, as many of you know, considers violation of the law as an act that causes people harm. Obviously, also how it affects the community as a whole. And these are the principles that we talked about a second ago, which was restoring the victim, restoring the community that was affected, and then helping that participant kind of find their way back to, not being in this situation. And I talk very, very fast. I get yelled at by court reporters all the time. So if I'm doing that now, please feel free to tell me to slow it down a little bit. But if we want to keep moving, Patrice. What is the role of a panelist? Again, these folks are all community volunteers. They all live in Contra Costa County, and they come from different walks of life. People who are retired, people who are teachers, folks who are stay-at-home parents, people who have, been involved in the criminal justice system, like they were in prison maybe 30 years ago and they've since reformed and have a lot to share and a different perspective to share with participants. We have a few of them on board. We have people who have been victimized by a crime. Again, it brings a different perspective. Panelists all meet with the participants and the victims in a facilitated conference. Currently, we're doing all of this via Zoom because we did start late last year to kind of test it out to see what this program would look like. We have not had an in-person session. We were looking at going into in-person a few months ago, and the vote we got was that people preferred this to happen via Zoom because it allowed, I guess it makes it more, it accommodates better schedules, right? So we do these in the evening. Panels are all conducted in the evenings. They are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays between the hours of 7 and 9 p.m. We do one panel per night. And again, we do it via Zoom so that we can, let's not affect people who have to go to work in the daytime. We try not to affect school schedules. We try to do it when most kids are in bed so the parent can still, show up to these panels. And then it's not a big hassle for participants who don't have cars and can't get to a certain location, as well as the panelists. It makes it helpful because all they have to do is shut off their computer at the end of the night. So they're very likely to stick around and volunteer longer. And we have less of a turnaround as opposed to making people drive out to different locations. That's not to say that we're not going to be doing this in person later on. It's just so far Zoom is working really well and we don't want to mess with that. And then as you guys can read here, panelists identify the harm again to the community, to a specific victim. And then they go over the circumstances that caused that situation. So kind of getting to the root cause. And going back to a couple slides, I talked about how these are all very private meetings. Our attorneys are not present. I myself am not present. I am in a separate waiting room in case they have questions. And the reason for this is to protect the participant. So let's say, for example, that person goes through the program and they do not successfully complete it for whatever reason. What we don't want happening is that whatever they had to share, that digging deep and kind of getting personal and sharing, like, this is why I did what you're saying I did, they've now admitted to committing a crime, right? And so in order to protect them from, I guess, our office as a whole, we keep this all very private so that if they don't successfully complete the program and we do in fact have to file charges later, nothing they said in this program can be held against them later. So none of that information ever gets out. I don't get it myself. The only ones privy to that information are the 3 panelists, and they have to sign a waiver stating that they won't share this information with anyone outside of that panel. If we can keep going, please. I think I kind of rambled on about how the program works. So our office, we have cases that come through. Obviously, all of our law enforcement agencies will gather their misdemeanors, bring them in and say, hey, we think these are potential cases that are good for NRP. Once the misdemeanor supervisors have gone through those cases and said, okay, we think this is a good fit and we would in fact prosecute it, if it were another, like if we weren't sending them into this program, then it comes to me. I then look at it again. I run a background, make sure this person does in fact, have a clean record for the most part, maybe a couple things on there, but no gun charges, no child cases, no DV. Once we go through all of that, again, I contact that participant, walk them through the program. If they want to participate, I tell them what that process is. If they don't want to participate, I thank them for their time and I I send the case back to the misdemeanor team for filing. I then have to schedule the panel. The panel gets a redacted police report. They use that and what the participant has to say to determine as a whole with the participant and the victim in agreement for the outcome of this situation. We have completion and return forms that they have to all do so we can keep track for tracking recidivism. And then I have to do follow-up every 6 months to kind of check in on everyone and see how everyone's doing. And we can keep going. Updates, we can skip past that one for a sec. Victim offender community, that's kind of what the process looks like. And then the next few slides, you guys are going to see our flyer and our application. If you know anyone who wants to be a panelist or who wants to be more involved, anyone who has specific questions that I may not have answered, you're always welcome. My contact information should be shared, but you guys are more than welcome to reach out anytime. Updates, we've had several people go through and successfully complete the program already. I've had one person who did not complete it and it was her choice where she's like, I don't want to do this. Some of the questions I think that, people like to ask are like, well, what are some of the consequences? So we like to tell our our panelists, you are not judge, jury, and executioner. You are not here to punish someone for something they did. You are here to work with that person to determine what a solution is to this situation. And so and I know some people might think this is weird or ridiculous, have been some of the words I've gotten. Some of the outcomes have been write an apology letter to the person you affected. We may not think that's a big deal, but that person that received it was like, wow, the fact that you could say sorry for something, like, I don't think anybody's ever asked me or said, you know, I'm sorry for what I've done. So that's a big deal for them. Having them involved in saying, what exactly is it that you need? What are your resources has been helpful. There are some courses, some of them have been assigned, others have been given community service hours, others have been asked to complete certain tasks. Like a student that was already in college was like, now you have to provide, you know, proof of your passing grades so that we know that you're on track and you're not, you know, messing up this whole opportunity. So there's a range of things, but it's not necessarily punishment. It's more of a team effort to come up with an agreement that everybody thinks would be the best outcome for situations. I talk a lot. Questions? And you guys,
Gigi, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for individuals. I love the idea of it. I guess I just would love for it to be as fully inclusive as possible. So how do you assure that this opportunity is afforded to non-English speakers?
Got it. So it's fully inclusive in a couple different ways. One way is that this is a program that is completely free of charge. So one of the things that I talked about was whether a participant is assigned a course. We use Advent as the program that provides some of those courses. Our office covers those expenses. The only expense a person would have to come out of pocket would be a restitution type thing. Like you broke your neighbor's window, that you would have to pay for, but they can come up with payment plans, so on and so forth. Inclusivity, as in like you were mentioning language wise, we have several folks who can interpret. We can provide an interpreting service, or they can bring their own interpreter. Also, our panelists, like I said, range in a variety of diverse backgrounds, education-wise, just everything as a whole. So I think we've done a pretty good job of that. The other thing is we try to get folks from the same environment. So for instance, I don't have folks from Walnut Creek reviewing cases from Richmond because that would not make sense. So it's people from the communities that reside where these crimes happen are the ones that are reviewing those cases. Make sense?
Sounds wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll just raise my hand and respond myself, I suppose, but I did want to raise hand and say thank you for taking the time to present this to us. I think it is really relevant for the things that we're working on. Of course, you know, the lens that we're looking through here with the Racial Justice Oversight Body is trying to reduce racial disparities in the system. And that has me thinking about which sorts of charges are being included here and whether those are, how those shake out in terms of representation, if those are disproportionately impacting African-American and Latinx members in our community, or if these are more trending towards types of offenses that are already more heavily white members of the community. So basically, how does that work out in terms of which offenses are included and who's participating?
So I think the background or the guide we had given ourselves to work off of, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, oh, this is terrible. Why can't I remember the name? It's not Community Solutions. It's a diversion program where we were sending cases to before. I think that was kind of the background that we gave ourselves and said, we don't want to create a list, right? Because one day we're going to have a case that's not on that list and somebody's going to panic and say, it's not in the, it's not on the list. We can't handle it. So what we do is most of the cases that have come through, I realize there's some sort of addiction that goes with it. There is some sort of drug background that has affected them. So that person who stole, that gallon of milk from the grocery store, it wasn't because they wanted to, it was because in a sense they had that necessity. They shouldn't have done it, but it's kind of everywhere. And like I said, we're doing it throughout the county. It's not a program that's specific to one area. It's all areas of the county. So we're going to see different crimes in different areas. Like in Walnut Creek, we're seeing a lot of shoplifting. As opposed to Richmond, I'm saying stuff that has to do with like anger and frustration, and that leads to vandalism. So I'll share very quickly with you all. One of the first cases I got, it was a gentleman out of, I think he was in Concord, African-American male. I call him and he basically calls me every name in the book and says, and excuse my language, says, what the F is the district attorney's office going to do for me? I'm a criminal. And that broke my heart, right? Because it's like, you're not giving yourself a chance. So I guess I could see why you don't expect anyone else to give you a chance. So when I spoke to him, I said, look, give me a minute. Let's get you through this program. If you don't think it's a good fit, you get out and we move about our day, right? He agreed to participate in a panel. His was vandalism. He actually went into a gas station. He was drunk from the night before and he was high off his behind. He goes into the liquor store and he breaks a bunch of stuff inside of there. It doesn't hurt anyone. He just threw a bunch of stuff on the ground and storms out. Cops are called. He gets arrested, all this fun stuff. So I get him into a panel. He skips panel 1. So I call him and I'm like, dude, I thought you said you wanted to be on this. What's going on? He's like, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was high. I didn't want to deal with any of this. And I'm like, he's like, whatever, just file my case because I know you're not going to give me another chance. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm in a good mood today because I am going to give you another chance. And I was just messing with him, obviously. And I was like, let's get you in a panel. Let's make it happen. So I get him in a panel after the 3rd try. He participates. He gets out of there and he said, Miss Janet, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I cannot believe that, that somebody was willing to work with me. I've got a job. I just moved. So now he's out of our county. He's living somewhere else. He's doing fantastic. He's seeing his kids. And I don't think he's ever had a job longer than he's had as of recent. And he checks in like every other week, like, hey, I'm still good. I'm doing great. So I think we can't, it's not perfect, right? It's still growing. We're still building. I don't think we could say cases are leaning one way or the other quite yet, but I think we're touching on the fact that we're sticking in particular areas of the county and saying, let's hold this community. I guess let's all work together as a community to resolve these things. That's what's kind of helping. So we're not, just like you said, there's not those disparities of we're just going to pick everyone for fun or because they look this way or because they live there. I think it's based on the community. And I think that's going to help. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to help.
Thanks, Janet. I appreciate that answer. And Gigi, I see your hand.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate the question that you asked, Jeff. Of course, I work with individuals who live with mental health challenges, and sometimes having them have an understanding and comprehend this great opportunity that would be afforded to them. Just from hearing you talk, it sounds as if you have built great relationships and you really go the distance trying to have people understand how they benefit from the program. But there is a trust issue from the DA's office saying that that this is available to them. So how are you going to break down the barriers and reach the people who would benefit most from this program because of that trust? Are you relying on working with liaisons from other agencies like NAMI who get phone calls about people who would benefit from this but have no way of really connecting them? I mean, I've heard about this program, but the average Joe has not. So how are we going to build it?
That is something we are currently working on. And it is exactly that. It's creating relationships, reaching out to folks that have answers that I may not have. Patrice is a great resource. I've reached out to her a handful of times. There's a couple different organizations that have said, hey guys, like this program is at play. If somebody asks, it exists. Some of my colleagues have sent information, I believe, over to the public defender's office and just said, hey, we have this program going just in case, FYI. I personally don't think I have an issue with communicating with folks. I was born and raised in South Central LA. My dad was in and out of prison. So people thought I was going to be a defense attorney one day. Like, it's not who I am as a person. But my thing is, I look at things situationally, right? I can't determine a person, I can't judge a person by their circumstances because that's not who they are. And like I said, my job isn't to sit here. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not prosecuting these cases. I'm sitting back and just saying, hey, this is the opportunity our elected has chosen. This is the opportunity that she's created as a program. And my job is to oversee it and keep some neutrality. If I at any point in time figure out I can't keep it neutral or anything like that, I got to step out of that, right? And like I said, and I've protected myself, our office, and participants by not even being present in the panels. I'm not allowed to be. So that's one of the solid rules that we started from the very beginning. We have a panel going on. No one from the DA's office is in that panel while that participant is basically airing out their dirty laundry. And that's so far what has worked. To touch a little bit on what you were saying about the mental health issues, this isn't a program that's completely built for folks with mental health issues. And the reason we say that is because that person has to be 100% committed to the program and understand that they are admitting to something like, yes, I did in fact steal that gallon of milk, but these were the circumstances and this is why I did what I did. If a person with mental health issues comes in, they can't always, understand that they're admitting to things that they then have to take responsibility for. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's why I asked the question if they could work with a liaison, someone that could help them, guide them through the process of understanding that, I guess, speaks their language, because so many people are incarcerated who live with mental illness, with criminalized mental illness. So not necessarily having it targeted for them, but offering opportunities for removing barriers for them to participate would be important.
I think that's definitely a conversation we should have offline. I'd love to get more information on how you think we can make things work. I know our second in command, Simon O'Connell, we've talked about that before. We're like, how do we provide these resources besides, training officers on the street? There's a lot going on that we haven't quite touched on yet, but it'd be a good conversation for us to have so we have a starting point, right? We are not the experts in that field, so it would be good to have you kind of guide us and say, look, this is what we're looking for. Can we all figure out a way to make it work?
Thank you again, Janet. Let me just ask if there's anyone else on in the meeting here who would want to have further question. I know that you did give to us your contact information, so if folks want to follow up, they can do that. And also the presentation that you've given us, I think, is included in our agenda packet. So that's available to everyone through, thank you, Janet, putting your contact information in the chat. So that's available to everyone, just as you've gotten the agenda and the materials included. You'll have that background info. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate you all hearing me out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, I think that brings us now then to agenda item 5. And this is our standing agenda item for Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council updates. And here's where I usually turn to Kiki and say, what can we learn? And perhaps I'm turning to Robin Nicole. I don't know. I'll just hand over to anyone who has better info than I do of what's going on in that area.
Thanks, Jeff. I can provide a bit of an update, and I know that we also have other members on here, so I'm happy to let somebody else chime in if I missed something. So basically, at our last PICE committee meeting on October 3rd, we did a lot of discussion around kind of the purpose of the subcommittee. We reviewed the list of recommendations that I believe were derived from the JJCC report. And just all of the work that went on there. And so we went over the recommendation, kind of talked about what our purpose is defined as a subcommittee, and whether or not, that still worked for the work that we envision the subcommittee doing going forward. and discuss whether or not it was time to consider whether the subcommittee should kind of take on a different role or mission. And just making sure that the work plan going forward would still align with kind of the name of the subcommittee and what the purpose and the definitions were defined as. So I believe that's probably going to be an ongoing conversation. But there was a lot of robust talk about it. I think ultimately we sort of ended with keeping the purpose, so prevention, intervention, and community engagement the same, and just trying to figure out kind of what is left on the actual work plan and what needs to be added and so on and so forth. I also introduced Robin Nicole Livingston as the proxy for that subcommittee during our last meeting as well. And then Mr. Lava talked about YEEP, which he might be filling you in about as well. But the gist of it was a lot of conversation about, the purpose and the focus of the subcommittee going forward.
Thanks for that update, Kiki. It sounds like those are essential conversations to make sure that, right, the work is most effective and is consistent with the mission. And those talks always are key in this space and anywhere where we're trying to have policy. So given that introduction, I know you mentioned there were folks on this meeting call who would also were there or have some experience. Does anyone else want to add about the JJCC meeting impressions or things that for our discussion here?
I think Kiki's comments related to the prevention and intervention subcommittee of the JJCC specifically, which is, one piece of the JJCC, but not topic 5A related to the ranch, was not something that was really discussed fully within that particular subcommittee.
Right. And oh, sorry, but Kiki, please.
No, I was just agreeing with Mr. Laba that that definitely was not part of our discussion at PICE.
So that clarification made. Let me ask it, unless there's anything on the issue related to PICE and mission and kind of work plan, the areas that Kiki was talking about. Let me open it up further. We're talking JJCC updates, and I understand and this is what's referenced in our agenda, that there was update proposal at a recent JJCC meeting, and of which committee, I'm not certain. Right, reasonable proposal to stop screen share. That works on my end. I think Patrice, that's coming on your side. No problem. Good idea. That there was discussion of or a proposal to close the Orrin Allen Youth Facility, the ranch, and Jill, I see your hand, and also Gigi, so I will turn to you in a moment, just to say that I think many folks here will remember that we had what we called then a community listening session, but it was basically making sure that we were informed as community as we're taking action, and this was nearly a year ago, maybe more than a year ago, as I'm thinking of it, probably more than a year ago. And that at the time, we probably had as much robust participation and feedback and comment from community as we have for anything. And in this space of the subcommittee, that is, and there it was almost uniformly, if not uniformly, folks saying that they were opposed to the proposal. And that was, I think, key in my mind of adding to the agenda here, or flagging it, as I know this is not a foreign issue to this group. There was a lot of input and consideration and attention to it at the time. So if this is on the radar, I wanted to make sure that those that are concerned about it are aware of it, and it seemed appropriate to bring up here. So let's see, in order, let me invite Jill and then Gigi to speak on this item.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. So just for clarification purposes, I don't recall it being at a JJCC meeting recently, but just to give you a bit of history, of course, you talked about a year ago when the new chief probation officer came in, she was given the directive to look at whether or not to close the ranch. And then that was the big groundswell of public input that you talked about. And then at the budget hearings in April, she gave a presentation about a future plan for the juvenile hall, and combined with the fact that the DJJ population's coming back and doing more of a campus plan. And so that there wasn't enough time at the budget hearings to fully delve into that. And so she came back to the Board of Supervisors in September. Chief Isa came back to the Board of Supervisors in September to start the discussion again about how to transition youth from the ranch and how to phase out the ranch and bring in community programming, because most of those kids I think would benefit from being in community to receive their programming. I think that's the concern, is to incarcerate fewer children and provide them more supportive services. So the beginning of that discussion happened in September. The Board of Supervisors did direct ISA to go back and do more public discussions on that proposal. And so that's where it stands right now. There is no decision to close the ranch. There was a direction to do more community listening. And I know the Juvenile Justice Commission reached out to ISA, and they're going to have a presentation at their meeting coming up on Monday from ISA as to what her future plan is. So I think that's where it stands right now. I don't recall it being at JJCC yet, because that meeting comes up what is it, next week? I can't remember the date. We have the JJCC meeting coming up. So I think that's where we are to date. There is no decision to close the ranch today.
Thank you, Jill. I think all of that is important context for us to know where we are as we're having this discussion. Gigi, I saw your hand before, and yes, please.
Sorry about that. I got kicked off of my laptop, probably with the excitement of hearing that there had not been any firm decision. Working in mental health, we recognize a therapeutic environment for healing is really important, and caging young people who live with mental illness in a juvenile hall type setting works against the healing process for individuals, especially recognizing many of them have been untreated. So if there are community sessions in place to get further impact, I would love to have the mental health community be included in that. We're doing more and more work with young people, especially after COVID, and recognizing that we need to have a more compassionate approach versus a punishment approach. So that was good news hearing from Jill that there was no decision made about the closure, and hopefully funding wise, we can in this county prioritize our youth and even look at some of our Measure X money and build something that would be an environment of healing for young people who have untreated mental illness and make bad decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. I want to invite anyone, everyone, and also I know that my colleagues, Jonathan Laba and Joni Spears, will likely have some kind of real world application experience in here to talk about, because in other spaces in adult criminal, historically, I've been able to talk about what I've seen on the ground and what this would mean in practice. So can I just invite Jonathan and or Joni to talk a little bit about what you see the potential implications of closing the ranch?
Sure, I can start. And Gigi, I just wanted to express appreciation for your comments. And I would note that next week, as Jeff pointed out, on Monday, the Juvenile Justice Commission is holding a special session from 5:30 to 7 to discuss the proposed ranch closure, and they definitely want community input. The JJCC meeting next week on Wednesday, the 19th, is at 3:30. That's also an opportunity for the community to provide input. The agenda just talks about probation updates, but I did clarify that is going to include a discussion of the ranch. And although it's gratifying to hear that today there has not yet been a decision, I do think that it is fair to say, and our probation colleagues on today's meeting can correct me if I'm wrong, but that the chief probation officer does intend to ask the Board of Supervisors on October 25th for the blessing of the Board of Supervisors to move forward with ranch closure. So the fact that there has not been a decision yet, I think that that's going to be short-lived unless the Board of Supervisors defers a decision at the October 25th meeting. Jeff, I certainly have comments that I wish to share, but I wonder if anyone from probation today, before we make our comments, would like to kind of describe probation's vision for all of this.
Yeah, sure, that's appropriate. Thanks, Jonathan. And right, with the caveat of not wanting to put on the spot here in the sense that not expecting Rob, Nicole, or Kiki or Ed to be kind of giving the presentation on this subject, but I think fair enough to just say invitation if there's some context from probation side on where this stands before we take further comment from folks. I invite that.
All right, so I just want to note that this was not known to me as a planned part of today's conversation. So I absolutely don't have, any detail to share on the subject. And I'll also add that both Ed and I, because you mentioned him by name, are part of field services, as is Rob and Nicole. And honestly, the closure or the plans for any of the institutional part of our department is largely under another sort of scope of probation. I know that the chief has made some comments, and I think Jonathan just mentioned that there is, or maybe he was mentioning other meetings, so maybe I'm saying it for the first time, that there is another Board of Supervisor planned conversation on, I believe, the 25th of this month as well, where that is largely what the chief is going to talk about. So I think that it's probably more appropriate for the information to come from the chief at the impending discussions that are going to happen next week on the 17th and 19th, and then again on the 25th at the Board of Supervisors meeting.
Totally fair. Right. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't continuing the conversation. I think Jonathan was bringing this up. I took it in the spirit of saying the chance to be able to give the input, but not the expectation that this was a time for a presentation. So that said, Jonathan and or Joni, if there's kind of, as I'm thinking of it at this point, is right, community was largely saying last time, this is less in the direction we want to move. Juvenile hall is more punitive than the ranch concept, but that's a pretty just general level of it. Can you talk a little bit more about like how you see this playing out in terms of real impacts for youth in the county?
Sure. And I will say that my comments today about the propriety of the proposed closure, those are going to be my personal comments as a member of the community. I do think our department ultimately will take an official position, but I'll need to work with Ellen with respect to that. So those are just the thoughts that I'm going to share today are my personal thoughts, but informed of 26 years of working in this space. First, to Jane and Elsie's questions in the chat. So the county has both a Juvenile Justice Commission and a Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. The Juvenile Justice Commission is having a meeting this coming Monday from 5:30 to 7. And I think Jill put a link to that in the chat. And the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, which meets bi-monthly, I believe at this point, has its regular meeting next Wednesday. And that's also going to be an opportunity for public comment. And both of those meetings are extremely important. They represent a wide range of stakeholders, but they're somewhat different compositions and purposes of each of those committees, even though their interest in this issue definitely overlaps. So with respect to this issue, as Jill pointed out, there was and you, Jeff, there was very robust conversation about this. It's now, believe it or not, been about 2 years when the issue first was presented to the Board of Supervisors. And there was very significant community opposition. There was a letter submitted that I think was signed by over 40 youth-facing CBOs in the county expressing concern about the proposed ranch closure. And one of the overriding themes, which I think is equally important today, is what does this mean, not just for that institution, but for how the county serves youth as a whole? And what does it mean for what we refer to as the continuum of services and the continuum of care for youth? The ranch is a custodial facility, and you might find it somewhat peculiar that there would be public defenders who are opposing the closure of a custodial facility. So why am I doing that? I'm doing that because I believe very strongly that the ranch as a far less restrictive and more holistic, and I believe trauma-informed program and facility than juvenile hall really occupies a critical space within this continuum. From what I've heard from probation is stating that they hope that all youth who otherwise would have been committed to the ranch can be served within their homes, and that probation is creating something new called a community pathway, which there hasn't been much information about, but from what I understand, it would be providing enhanced services of a wraparound nature to youth in their homes, so that youth can be retained in their homes instead of going to a custodial facility of any kind. This is something that I 100% support. I think all of us are very strong supporters of the concept of having youth remain in their homes as much as possible, and recognize that when youth are removed from their homes, that the ultimate outcomes for those youth, no matter how well-intentioned the service delivery providers are, outcomes for youth get measurably worse. There's an abundance of evidence that even one incarceration in a juvenile hall facility has significant impacts on education, on mental health, on the likelihood that that youth is going to become further intertwined within the justice system. The reason why I personally have such concerns about the closure of the ranch is that I do not believe that the youth who are currently at the ranch, no matter what type of enhanced community program probation creates, are actually going to be allowed to remain in their homes. My colleagues and I see day in and day out recommendations and advocacy from other members of the system for youth to be removed from their homes and to be sent to places like the ranch and juvenile hall. And that's not going to change. And I'm not even faulting. Everybody in the system has a role to play, and I'm not faulting prosecutors or probation officers or judges for the decisions that they make. I'm just trying to, at least from my perspective, express a note of practicality about all of this. Right now, we have, as of last Friday, 58 youth who are at juvenile hall, 58. And there were 12 youth, I believe, as of last Friday, that were at the ranch. So already we have this really extraordinary disparity. The ranch numbers have steadily gone down, and the juvenile hall numbers have steadily gone up. And that's because the recommendations that the probation department makes and the decisions that judges are making is far more towards incarceration at juvenile hall than for youth to remain at the ranch. And I also learned last week that probation has essentially directed the line probation officers not even to screen youth at the ranch anymore, even though a decision by the Board of Supervisors has not been made. So whatever intentions in some of these public fora are expressed about trying to serve low and moderate risk youth within their home communities, the reality is those youth are going to be removed from their homes no matter what advocacy the defense presents. And if the ranch does not exist, they're going to be incapacitated at juvenile hall, which Gigi very eloquently described, and I agree with this completely, as not the type of facility where youth should be long-term. It is a juvenile prison. It is concrete and steel and confined spaces. And already, I believe we have far too many youth who are committed there. We have 28 youth who are there post-commitment and serving extended periods of time already. So those are the significant concerns, and this will have a very deleterious impact on the already very profound racial and ethnic disparities that we have in the system. I would guess that the juvenile hall population is probably over 95% and perhaps 100% youth of color. And elimination of the ranch has really significant impacts on other parts of the system. Right now, we're going through something called youth justice realignment. The state prison system for youth is closing. We've created what are called local secure track programs at juvenile hall to serve the realigned youth. And it's just very concerning that ranch closure potentially could happen without a full examination of how it impacts youth at all the different points of the system.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think that really helps give context to the implications here, one way or the other, what happens. And Gigi, I see your hand, so let me turn to you.
Oh, I guess I was going to ask Jonathan to give the demographic information. He gave us the number of individuals, but then you alluded to the fact that about the majority are youth of color. And so since it's the racial justice, I think when we give any statistics, we should also include the ethnicity, because we're trying to move to a place where we're not criminalizing skin color, but obviously we are doing it, because there's no way in the world with African Americans making less than 10% of the population, our juvenile justice system should appear the way it does. There definitely has to be some young people from Danville and Alamo and other places who have lighter skin tones or white, who are committing crimes and getting counseling instead of going into the concrete jungle. So I'm just really focused on giving out the numbers so that it's very clear to everyone what we're doing to these young people. And then I also have learned that 70% of the youth have a diagnosis of a mental illness. So it's not anecdotal information, it's documented. So hoping we can, not just show up here and talk, but put action policies in place, et cetera, and really do the work. And it would be going backwards if we were to close the ranch when we need to be moving toward alternative, healthier settings. I said it earlier, but especially when I think about the phone call that I get daily from young people, and I'm advocating for them to get treatment services, and instead they're getting more contact with a deputy or a correctional officer than they are a therapist. Thank you.
Thanks, Gigi. Patrice, let me invite you.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, we didn't get a request to have someone from probation to speak to this specific item, as Kiki has mentioned. So I just wanted to reiterate again the two meetings that are scheduled where formal updates will be given. So it, in order for us to have a much more balanced discussion on this, unfortunately, someone is not here to respond to some of the claims that have been made. So just wanted to offer that up as again, a point of clarification. No request was made to have someone present to speak to the specific item.
That's fair to bring up, Patrice. And right, knowing that this is limited in that form, that there was not any request for presentation or for basically a report on this, as much as just indicating that we would have the discussion here, knowing that it was something of particular interest to people who had participated at the previous forums here in the listening session.
In addition to that, also to hear some of the concerns that are raised. So just wanted to make sure that that's noted.
Yes, that is fair, Patrice. And I'm glad that there are upcoming sessions that are going to have that as a component. So with that in mind, let me just ask if there are other voices that want to speak on this item before we transition to the next. I'll see your hand.
I thank you. So someone mentioned probation is going to be having some listening sessions, and I got a little confused about when and what those are.
Sorry, that was me. And I think there is no listening session scheduled. The Board of Supervisors asked probation, asked the chief to go out and, present to the community, collect their input. And so I know, just like the agendas that have been put in the chat, Patrice put in the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council where this will be discussed. On Monday is the Juvenile Justice Commission. There was a presentation, oral presentation given in April to the Board of Supervisors during budget hearings, where you can listen to that portion of that presentation from Issa directly to hear what her ideas were back in April. And then the Board of Supervisors meeting that just happened, you could certainly watch that video to hear what she had to say thus far. And then as we go forward and as she does public presentations on these in-community meetings, there'll be opportunities for people to give their feedback. And beyond that, I don't know what her plan is for public meetings beyond the 2 that I know are currently scheduled. Because this just happened on late September. I want to say September 20th, maybe. So, that's all in development. Anise is really open, and I'm sure if somebody asked her for a presentation in this meeting or for more discussion on it, she would definitely provide that information.
Thank you, Jill. I see also Doug's hand and then Marisol.
Yes, Doug Leach. Multi-Faith Action Coalition was one of, I guess, 24 or so community organizations that signed and submitted a letter opposing the previously proposed ranch closure. And just to set the timeline right, the date of that letter was July 2020. So it was over 2 years ago that this previous proposal for the ranch closure had been floated. I just want to say that I hope there is adequate opportunity for public comment before there is any action taken on this. And I don't think there's enough time between now and October 25th to take care of all the need for public comment. And I just want to say that I really appreciate Jonathan Laba's point of view that he expressed. And I agree that any proposal to close the ranch, which provides the holistic trauma-informed approach that he described, and send those kids to juvenile hall instead, is not something that that I would accept, and I doubt that very many members of the community would find that an agreeable proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Marisol, please.
I saw that Cheryl was actually before me, and I wanted to make sure that she was recognized.
Appreciate that. Cheryl, would you like to go first?
Sure, you probably can't see my head in my colors.
Yeah, I don't see it, but I'm always happy to hear your voice. Please, the microphone is yours.
Buenas tardes. I'm always struck by this, especially because this is community engagement, and we speak a lot on this, and hearing Gigi's voice and hearing Jonathan's voice. I'm always struck by it takes us to come to these meetings, and I come to nearly all of the Board of Supervisors meetings, and I'm always struck that this is how we have to find out about these other meetings. I don't know why we have to hide these meetings from the public. Why do we have to come to these meetings? And many of us are fully engaged in the community, but we have to find out about these meetings. So we have to find out these ways. How do you think the public has to find out? It's like a hide and seek game to find out what's going on. Why can't we make these more accessible to the public? This is ridiculous. It's like, why can't you publish it? Why can't you make sure that the public is well aware that these kind of meetings are happening? To announce on the 13th, the Thursday, that a meeting is going to occur on Monday nights. It's at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, or whatever. And it's not even announced. We just found out, right? And we found out because we're here. How can that be acceptable? And how can it be acceptable? Because then if people don't show up, and then the whole spin on it is that the public doesn't care, or the public is not involved, or the public is not engaged, the public doesn't have any type of feedback on it. There has to be a more concerted intentionality behind making sure that our babies are not put in not just concrete jungle, but these little baby prisons. And that we're not making decisions about these children without the public's input. And not just a small sector, but everyone who has a vested stake in these children's future. And that includes even people whose children are not being locked up. So we have to have a better way of communicating that these meetings are happening, and not just a 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday meeting that is being hidden, buried down in the agenda. Where some of us may have the benefit of listening all day, because those meetings go on all day and people have to work and they can't stay on for 9, 10, 11 hours trying to figure out when it's going to come up on the agenda. Some of us can do that. I have the luxury, the privilege of being able to listen all day, but not everybody does. So you can't keep burying it in the agenda and then saying, well, it was on there and she delivered a report. No, he's got to be given some very prime attention, and we have to make sure that everybody has their voices heard and that people know this is of utmost importance to our communities. And stop waving it off and putting it on the fringes. And let's stop making this a last minute announcement, because this is offensive. This is offensive. And this racial justice oversight body needs to be taking this up with this county as something that is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Let me turn to Marisol and then Jill.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Cheryl. I definitely agree with your sentiments. For people that don't know me, my name is Marisol Cantu. I'm a third generation Chicana here from Richmond with a primo hermano, who in English terms means brother, cousin, that was raised in the ranch and in juvenile hall, and then sent to San Quentin and died at 21 in Vallejo. And I just want to know that personally, this hits me deeply. Professionally, I'm the organizing and training director at Safe Return Project in Contra Costa County, and I would like to read the letter from 2 years ago to remind people in this. I won't read the entire letter, but I will read the part where in regards to racial justice, because I do believe that the racial justice oversight body should be taking up the community listening sessions and prioritizing this. Also, it's very interesting that on October 25th, there's a call for the establishment of the Office of Racial Justice and Social Justice, and yet we are coming and looking at the closure of the ranch and forcing our children, especially Black and brown children, into cages once again. So just to, I won't again read the entire letter, but I will go ahead to remind people that this is not new, as Doug and Jonathan mentioned from the letter. We are in the midst of local, state, and national conversations about reforming our adult and youth justice systems in a manner that reduces disparate impact on communities of color, promotes community-based treatment, and focuses resources on proven methods to rehabilitate, not incarcerate. Closing the Byron Ranch and creating a new, quote, ranch, unquote, program in juvenile hall is precisely the opposite direction in which this county should be moving. We understand that probation's narrative is that the ranch is not closing, but that it is simply being, quote, relocated, unquote, into juvenile hall, and all programs will be preserved. We strongly disagree with the notion that a ranch can be relocated into a juvenile hall facility. Moreover, this claim belies the extensive research that demonstrates that the setting in which youth are housed has critical relevance to how children respond to treatment and rehabilitation efforts. Juvenile hall is a locked institution with cell blocks, steel doors, concrete walls, and tall fences. It is the local version of a youth prison. Lock a child in juvenile hall, and the child perceives correctly that they are a prisoner, an inmate, a youth to be feared and not treated. Research consistently has demonstrated that custodial punishment of youth increases recidivism, impairs mental and emotional development, negatively impacts physical health, magnifies trauma, and disrupts social and familial connections. The ranch's open setting mitigates some of the risk. Juvenile hall magnifies them. Youth housed at the ranch are disproportionately Black and brown children. The transfer of youth from the ranch to juvenile hall will disproportionately impact our county's communities of color at a time that the board publicly has committed to reducing these same disparities. And I'll stop there. I just want to make sure that that reverberates in people's minds from a call to action 2 years ago with over 40 community-based organizations, nonprofits, hundreds of public comments calling for the closure of the ranch. And now we are looking at, calling for the closure of the hall. And now we are looking here, once again, 2 years later. I am interested in the community involvement, please. And I hope that the Racial Justice Oversight Board continues to make this a priority in any way, shape, and form. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisol. Jill, I saw your hand, and then Kiki, please.
Yeah, two things. So it's unfortunate the way this was worded on the agenda because I don't think it gave anybody a chance to really understand that this was about Warren Allen versus Marsh Creek. But and then the other piece is, you know, the community input is incredibly important. And I don't think that the challenge is without a presentation on actually what Issa's vision is, which her vision from her presentations that I already shared she's given, have incorporated all of that feedback that came from those initial discussions. And there is no proposal in her current discussions to transfer youth from Warren Allen to juvenile hall. So, you know, it's just there's lots of misinformation, I think, swirling now. The Juvenile Justice Commission is not an advisory body of the Board of Supervisors. It's actually advisory to the court system that's outside the county. I only mentioned that organization because I know I've been in contact with Rye Scott, and I gave him, the chair of that, all the information from previous presentations so that he could research it and agendize it. So I was just offering that as an opportunity. The Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council is definitely an advisory body. I don't know that there's going to be a decision at the October 25th Board of Supervisors. We don't have that agenda yet. So, you know, I think there's just a lot of unknown at this point in time. Publicly, there's been a lot shared by Issa in public meetings. And so I'm just concerned that this discussion continues and people are getting get the right information so that they can respond and share their concerns about what might be with the proposal based on a factual proposal, not information from 2 years ago, which, you know, so it's just really important that everybody have those opportunities to share that once they have seen the proposal. And the item at the Board of Supervisors was not to close the ranch. It was a report that was done, that's one of the recommendations, but it wasn't on the agenda to make a decision about closing the ranch that day. It was just to start the discussions on what the the consultants found when they did a complete review of the juvenile justice system.
Thank you, Jill. Let me hand to Kiki.
Thanks, Jeff. So I appreciate that, Jill. You actually said a few of the things that I was intending to say, just because I'm a little concerned about the misinformation and the misinterpretations of some things that have been discussed so far. And I just wanted to point back to a couple of things for just clear points of clarification from Mr. Laba's actual comments, because he brought them up. Just that there are about 12 youth at the Orrin Allen facility now. It is an open setting custodial facility. And he also mentioned that we are developing a plan for a community-based option in lieu of the ranch. So I just wanted to point that out as well, to say that there's no plan to take children that used to go to the ranch and put them in juvenile hall for any sort of confinement. It's actually quite the opposite. And I just think that's an important point of clarification, because I think perhaps that was misunderstood. I'd also just like to note that the last few days, but the ranch is also a 100-bed facility. So I just want to note that over the last many years, we've, worked really carefully to make sure that, youth in custodial settings have been very appropriately screened. And there's lots that goes into those decisions. So we're very much coming from a place of wanting to make sure that youth are not unnecessarily incarcerated as well. So I just felt that those were just a couple of points of clarification, because I think I heard more than one person say, or the ranch and juvenile hall, and that is not the plan. So I do think that some of the coming up, because they have been happening over the course of the last couple of years, certainly since I think even PICE was created in the summer of 2020. The continuing discussions that are coming up will be a bit more focused, and perhaps some of the misinformation that seems to be in the air of this conversation will be even further dispelled in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. And I'm going to turn to Elsie in just a moment, but I did want to just kind of give my feedback. Sometimes it's awkward to just have this communication, not have any response back to it, to say, right, there's concerns that I'm hearing of this not being balanced in terms of the opportunity to have both sides. And I think that's fair to say that we're hearing pretty much one side largely on what this is. And no doubt there will not be any decisions made here about what happens, right? But I'm hoping that, having heard some of the concerns here and clarifying, Kiki, what you're saying, some of the concerns aren't exactly accurate, and you've clarified some of that, this will give a chance, I hope, at these upcoming meetings for probation to know, okay, these are the concerns that we were hearing in this space, and there's a chance to address them before there's actually any decision made. That said, let me turn to Elsie. I see your hand.
Thank you. So two comments. This confusion or misinformation that you think we are responding to, I think is a symbol of the lack of transparency. We just have not been given information. Yes, perhaps reports, but reports that take up the majority of a period of time and leave no discussion, or reports to the public that have not been widely publicized through all sorts of communication, is not an opportunity or an invitation for us to respond. These are not listening sessions. These are reports, much like we get from the Sheriff's Department. And it continues to reflect a lack of trust. We often go to the Board of Supervisors meeting, we say our piece, and it is often ignored, even though the wide majority of commenters are making a point. And so these experiences lend us to look for opportunities to share our concern. And I'm glad I heard about today's meeting. And even though this is not a decision at this meeting, it has given us another opportunity to share with you our concerns. And I hope you will go back to the offices and let the staff know that these kind of meetings aren't what we're looking for. We're looking for opportunities for not just us people who find out about these meetings and can work them into our schedule, but we need to hear from the community, the people who are going to be impacted by these kinds of decisions and who care about our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. Jonathan, I see your hand, and let me just note that we're at about 2 minutes left of our meeting. So we're gonna maybe take this and one more comment before we end.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, and I just hope it was clear from my comments. I don't know if some of the comments about misinformation relate to anything that I said. I don't think so, but I just want to be clear that my comments related to the concern that youth who, going forward, if the ranch were closed, are likely not to be served in the community, but will end up at juvenile hall, number one. And number two, there is a population of youth who are currently at juvenile hall that I believe could be served at the ranch, that if the ranch were eliminated, we would have even less of a chance to have a less restrictive facility be a place that youth could go to.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate clarification, and I think at least there's been an opportunity for comments from a number of different voices here, which I think is getting closer to having the input and feedback that's necessary to make big decisions like these. Jane, I see your hand.
This is a question that is obviously not going to be answered in 30 seconds, but in this discussion, I wonder what is happening in this discussion of alternatives for youth who come into contact with the legal criminal system. I had heard about a juvenile restorative justice program that was going to involve people at Rise. That was a pilot of the DA's office. And I listened with great interest to the beginning of this meeting and wonder how restorative justice might figure in, and if that pilot program has ever started. It was at least, I know it was before COVID that I heard about it. And I just wonder if this is something that's also figuring in to how our county is going to deal with the transition. And of the, abolition of what's happening at the state level with juvenile justice. And I'd also just like to appreciate our public defenders at this meeting, and Jonathan in particular, who I have heard speak before. I just think the compassion with which many of our PDs operate is something that I personally want to applaud. So that's it.
Thanks, Jane. And I think you had some teasers in there, right? What's going on with this program, and what are the other diversion opportunities? Okay, so that's perfect. More and more encouragement to come on Monday and Wednesday next week, right? There's going to be the Juvenile Justice Commission and then the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. So there'll be a chance to hear more on those things and have continued discussion, as well as I'm encouraging everyone to attend there and the Board of Supervisors meeting that's coming up on the 25th. Patrice, I see your hand, and I think you'll have the last word.
Yeah, just really quickly, and maybe a recommendation with regards to future agenda planning. Both items 6 and 8 have been pushed back probably for the last 3 months, which were really important. Our job recommendations that I'm sure a few members were hoping to get some traction on. So I just want to uplift that, and that again, for really meeting discussions such as this one, where it would be imperative to have a presentation from the respective agency that is making any sort of major decision or in the process of proposing anything, that request be made in advance, so we could be sure that all the relevant information is included, enough folks are notified about it in advance, and that way they could bring their questions, comments, and concerns to that meeting. But to your point, there will be the Juvenile Justice Commission meeting next week, as well as the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. But I do want to really emphasize that also for our community engagement subcommittee here for our job.
Thank you, Patrice. And we are at and past time, so I will need to close out this meeting and look forward to seeing you in these upcoming spaces, as well as at our next subcommittee meeting, which will be in November. Thank you all for your time and energy, passion in these issues. Let's keep on working.